Hey everyone, this is Josh, and I'm going to do something that I haven't done in a while and do a quick recap of some films and TV shows that I have seen recently. More specifically, I'll be talking about content that came out on Netflix in May of 2021. Keep in mind that I'll only be giving my quick thoughts. I won't be going into depth a whole lot, so if I didn't cover something that you felt I should have, I'm sorry about that in advance. Let's get into it. One of the films I saw was The Woman in the Window. This film stars Amy Adams as the protagonist who has agoraphobia, an anxiety disorder that causes her to fear the outside. As a result of being stuck inside, she starts spying on her neighbors across the street and believes that she's witnessed a murder there. If you're wondering why the plot of this film sounds so familiar, it's probably because you've seen Alfred Hitchcock's 1954 film, Rear Window, which essentially has the same exact premise. This film is based off A.J. Finn's novel of the same name. The writer's real name is Dan Mallory, who has faced a lot of criticism for plagiarizing works of other people. I was curious and did more research on this guy who has a bizarre backstory. The New Yorker wrote an expose about him that, quote, detailed his past as a habitual liar who feigned fatal illnesses and fabricated a tragic family history. So according to this expose, he repeatedly told acquaintances that his mother was sick, dying, or dead in a move that apparently dates back to his college admission essays.
Hi, Mom.
Is that Mrs. Mallory?
That is Mrs. Mallory, right over there. Yes, she's accompanied me to Sydney. Yes. So I came over to the UK quite a few years ago for my PhD at Oxford.
He also repeatedly claimed to have a doctorate from Oxford in English literature, but no evidence was found that he earned that. He did begin a master's program, but his professors say that he had to withdraw because he had been diagnosed with brain cancer. What? Honestly, someone needs to make a film about this guy who may or may not be a con artist. On top of this crazy controversy with the writer, the film itself had its own issues. It was supposed to be released in fall of 2019, but got pushed back to spring 2020 after poor test screenings. And of course, it got pushed back one more time to 2021 because of, you know. Anyway, this film is kind of a dud. It's weird because I wasn't super bored, but it also didn't really feel like this movie was going anywhere. On paper, it looks like the type of film that should succeed with a great cast and Wright directing, who I think is very talented, even though I didn't like his last film very much. It also has some really pleasing cinematography by Bruno Dubanel, which is easily the best thing about this film. But even with all of that, it kind of just doesn't work, which I think mainly has to do with the script. The story is contrived and predictable, the dialogue is stiff, and the tone doesn't always feel consistent. There's also some sequences that are really corny and poorly put together. I think overall this film lives up to the bad hype. I'm going to give Woman in the Window a 1.5 out of 5. Another Netflix original I saw recently was Army of the Dead, which essentially is a heist movie with zombies in Las Vegas. Not a bad idea. This film was written, shot, and directed by Zack Snyder, who I'm not the biggest fan of, although I did like his first feature film, which was the 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake. So in a sense, he's returning to his zombie genre roots with this film. Out of the two, I definitely prefer the Dawn of the Dead remake, which is simple and effective. Army of the Dead is also simple, but not so effective. A lot of the issues I have with Zack Snyder's style that becomes more apparent with his more recent films is also present, and in some ways more severe in Army of the Dead. The film is bloated with a runtime of 2.5 hours. There were a few scenes that I felt could have easily been trimmed or taken out altogether. The dialogue is bad, and there's an excessive amount of slow-mo shots because, of course. I often did not care for the shallow depth of field that's utilized too frequently, especially during the first half. It makes the film feel very claustrophobic. I thought the story was okay. I was expecting parts of it to be silly and ridiculous, which it was, not always in a bad way. The major issue I have with this story is how derivative it can be sometimes. The film borrows quite a bit from Aliens, including certain dialogue.
You don't see them f***ing each other over for a goddamn percentage.
You don't see them f***ing each other over?
Bishop! God damn you!
She left us. God damn it.
Most of the characters are stock characters or stereotypes, like the foreign guy who's foreign and acts weird because he's foreign, or the dad who wasn't there character, the rebellious and stubborn daughter character, the douchey guy who has to act creepy towards women character, or the other douchey guy who no one trusts who also acts creepy towards women character. There are parts of the film I did enjoy. There are a couple of action set pieces that are fun to watch. I think the CGI is pretty good considering the $80 million budget. It blends in with the real world world stuff pretty well. I think it's worth noting that Tig Notaro, who plays the helicopter pilot, was not originally meant to play that part. It was Chris D'Elia, but he was removed after sexual misconduct allegations were levied against him in June of 2020. So they did a bunch of reshoots with her in front of a green screen and then digitally added her into the film. This does make a lot of sense when you watch certain parts of Tig Notaro's performance. Sometimes it seems like her timing is off and it feels like she's not really talking and responding to people. Especially in the scene that she's introduced, her timing is just so weird in that scene. But considering how late in production that change needed to happen and how seamless the results are, I think Zack Snyder and his crew should be really proud. I think some of the scenes of the team being assembled and introduced was entertaining, even if excessive, and the acting is adequate for it being an action film. Batista is surprisingly good as the lead, who handles serious moments competently. Do not be surprised if you see him take on more lead roles in the future. I think Army of the Dead is sort of middle of the road. It's not an atrocious Zack Snyder film like BVS, but it's also not nearly as good as some of his earlier stuff like Dawn of the Dead and 300. I'm going to give Army of the Dead a 2.5 out of 5. Another thing I saw on Netflix is Love, Death, and Robots Volume 2. This is an adult animated collection of short stories that showcases various styles of animation and genres. It's a lot shorter than Volume 1, which has 18 episodes. Volume 2 only has 8. What I really love about this series is the format. Most of these shorts aren't longer than 20 minutes, so if there's one you don't like, it's over pretty quickly. Volume 2 features way less gratuitous sexual content and violence, which I don't think was a bad thing. Sometimes the graphic content felt really unnecessary in Volume 1. Like Volume 1, I think Volume 2 is also hit or miss sometimes. It starts off kind of slow, the first 2 shorts are kind of meh, but gets a lot better with Episode 3, which is very good. In terms of how I would rank each episode, it would go 3, 7, 6, 5, 8, 4, 1, and 2. Even with the episodes I don't like, I'm still usually impressed by the animation style of each episode, so I never walk away from any particular episode hating it. I think the other problem that Volume 2 shares in common with Volume 1 is that some episodes don't feel like they really have much of a point. Like, sometimes it just seems like an exercise to do something cool with animation. I was pretty entertained by Volume 2 and would definitely recommend to people who love adult animated stories. I'm going to give Love, Death, and Robots Volume 2 a 3 out of 5. The last thing I saw recently on Netflix is Oxygen, or Oxygene. This is a French-language sci-fi thriller directed by Alexandre, whose last film, Crawl, I thought was kinda meh. Oxygen follows a woman who wakes up in a cryogenic chamber that's losing oxygen quickly with no memory of how she got there, so she must find a way out before running out of oxygen. If you've ever seen the 2010 film Buried with Ryan Reynolds, you might think that this is just another version of that same premise. And while Oxygen certainly does have some of the same story elements, it does enough to differentiate itself from Buried, especially later on in the film. Between the two, I actually prefer Oxygen, which I think does a better job at building suspense. There's some really creative and excellent camera work in the film, and the soundtrack by Rob is very good. I felt invested in the main character's goal. The performance by Melanie Lauren is very solid. There's a couple of story things that I felt didn't make any sense. Some of the animation also wasn't great, and there's this shot the film cuts to sometimes of what will happen once the oxygen is gone, which I felt was cheesy. But besides that, I highly recommend you watch this film. It's engaging and it really appeals to people who like sci-fi suspense and horror films like I do. I'm gonna give Oxygen a 3 out of 5. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you thought about these Netflix originals in the comments section below. I'll try to do more recaps like this in the future, not just with Netflix content, but with other streaming platforms and maybe theatrical releases as well. If there's anything you'd like me to review, then please leave a comment with your recommendations, and of course be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can know when I drop the next video. Thanks again, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Take it easy.